migration path. Now, for that you have to go back to the migration path they had followed while coming to India from Africa, that is along the coast. So, during post-glacial period, as the Bengal-Myanmar coast or Bengal glacial coastal shelf started submerging in phases, it did not submerge in one go or even gradually. It got submerged in three phases. And during each phase, let us say the first phase where O haplogroup got displaced. They got displaced about 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 years ago, and they had no choice. A fraction of them settled in eastern coast of India and a fraction of them migrated, but they possibly followed exactly the same route they had followed while coming from Africa to India, that is the coastal route. And then R1 Bravo is getting displaced maybe 10,000 years ago or between 10 and 11,000 years ago. This group then R1 Bravo, a fraction of R1 Bravo is getting settled on Bengal coast and the rest of the fraction is migrating also along the coast. The migration took place along possibly three routes. First, we have to understand that they definitely migrated along the coast, and at a later date, when Himalayan rivers started flowing, they followed trans-Himalayan migration. When Himalaya became suitable for human settlement, they followed trans-Himalayan migration route. And the third route is through central region of India, when they followed possibly the Narmada migration route. All of them converging near Gujarat coast, that is on western coast, and thereafter they followed Persia, Persian Gulf. At that time, initial stage, it was possibly a landmass, and gradually water, as the sea water increased, Persian Gulf gradually got extended.
Three phases you mentioned. First phase is the O for the
O haplogroup. When it appears to me, these are my hypothesis that on the Bengal coast, there has to be four layers. First is the layer along which the pre-glacial period population from mainland India.
These three phases.
Three phases. This landmass, we have to imagine that landmass had four regions. First region is when it got that land bridge which got connected with Andaman. Now we have to be very, very specific.
That explains the Andamanese
entry of Andaman tribes on foot to Andaman. But first thing, when the sea water started rising during glacial maximum, there were four regions. Now I have given maps to explain that definitely there were four regions when. During glacial maximum. Glacial maximum is the period when the sea level goes down maximum. when the temperature is low and sea water goes down to its bare minimum, and then when the area of landmass is highest. So that is glacial maximum, and there are four layers. First, what happens when it starts submerging, that area which actually connected with Andaman, that land bridge, that got dissociated. That is why we find Andaman does not have post-glacial period genetic identities. Andaman only has pre-glacial period genetic identities, M31. There is no O haplogroup, there is no R1 alpha, R1 bravo in Andaman. Andaman aboriginal tribes we are talking about. Only pre-glacial period could enter there, because first thing which gets submerged is this landmass which used to get connected with Andaman. Then the rest we have to divide into three territories.
After that, we have to deal with the O haplogroup.
Post-glacial period haplogroup. O is the first one which gets displaced.
So the first phase of migration of the O
haplogroup takes place. Now, obviously they had migrated. We will show a map how exactly R1 O haplogroup and R1 bravo migrated along the coast. At this stage, let us accept that pre-glacial period were present only in Andaman, and that is possible when the land bridge gets connected. And the rest, all three, are post-glacial period genetic identities which remained on the Bengal-Myanmar coast, and as the seawater increased more and more, each area submerged. When it submerged, that displaced a particular genetic identity which moved with its respective language and their cultural characteristic. And we find all of them reaching Mediterranean region. And as you have asked, very nice question, that what was my point is, first migration was possibly just the reverse route along which they had come from Africa, that is along the coastal route.
What you thought about that ASI, ANI rhetoric, sir?
That's a very interesting question. Now, one particular study identified that the genetic identity of Northeast is little different from genetic identity of South India. And they have, for whatever reason, named those two genetic identities as ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indian.
ASI?
Then they have confirmed that ASI has more connectivity with Andaman genetic identity. Now see, my view to explain this, now nobody is explaining how Vindhya Parvat can divide India into two genetic territories, because Vindhya Parvat is no barrier. It's a very minor hill. Unlike Himalayas, Vindhya Parvat cannot serve as a physical barrier to give two genetic divisions.
Exactly.
Then why the geneticists are finding issue? My view is anything south of Vindhya Parvat is actually pre-glacial period genetic identities, and that is why ASI is matching with Andaman. Andaman exclusively has pre-glacial period genetic identities, and ancestral North Indian territory or north of Vindhya Parvat actually has essentially post-glacial period, because that region was completely vacant during glacial period. So it was a vacant area where the post-glacial period community had settled. And then many of them went to Eastern Europe, Central Asia and came back. That is why ancestral North Indian has some similarity with Western Asia, Central Asia and Eastern Europe. So they are nothing but onward, and ancestral North Indians are nothing, they are post-glacial period genetic identities, and they are nothing but onward and reverse migration post-glacial period genetic identities. Many of them traveled to Eastern Europe and came back, so that is why ancestral North Indian has some similarity with even the Stipi genetic identity oblique. Even Arakigadi genetic identity has confirmed. Now we have to understand this Indus Valley civilization was a migration path to Egypt. So you won't get R1 alpha or genetic identities which went towards Europe. Now Mesopotamia is on the way to Eastern Europe and Sumer is on the way to Egypt. So we have to revise or review what we knew and how we explained after this, when we consider that post-glacial period genetic identities actually spread from India, and they traveled through different paths and they came back. What are the evidence they brought back, as you mentioned? So that is why we find that ancestral North Indian has some genetic similarity with Western Asia, Central Asia and Eastern Europe, because they are the post-glacial period genetic identities who had come, a fraction of them had come back, and in ancestral North India a little bit of that is available. Otherwise probably in Northeast somewhere onward migration, but post-glacial period. That is why two genetic identities are different. That this is post-glacial period genetic identity and this is essentially pre-glacial period. And then lot of blending has taken place. So we can't exclusively say that this territory will have only this. There is lot of admixture. But after all, a scientific study has confirmed that the genetic identity of this region, that is north of Vindhya Parvat, is little different from here, but we can't explain that otherwise.